in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's training call. Our topic today is how do you become a great negotiator? And I know this is a topic that is extremely important when you think that we're in sales and we're negotiating through every part of the placement process. It does require, the skills and the ability to effectively negotiate through not only the placement process but the fill process as well. Today we're going to discuss three separate areas. The first area is when do you actually negotiate, why it's important to effectively negotiate, and how do you master the art of effective negotiating. When you're in the recruiting profession, you've got to master the art of negotiating. And when I'm out speaking at conferences, I always ask the audience, when is the last time you read a sales book, or when is the last time you read a book that shows you how to be a negotiator? And almost always there's no one that has done that. And yet this is an extremely important skill that we have to master if, in fact, you're going to have deals close and not blow up on your desk. There's countless times when you negotiate during the placement process, and we're going to discuss some of those. The definition of negotiating, which I think is important to clarify, is to deal successfully to obtain and arrange for a transfer to another's consideration. You must become proficient in negotiating for one basic reason, and that's the fact that we have people on both sides of our sale. In most other sales, people are negotiating with a person on one end, and they have a product on the other end or a service on the other end. They don't have a person on the other end. And our sale is really compounded, and our negotiating is much more challenging because we've got people on both sides of our sale, which is double the amount of negotiating that most salespeople have to master. Most studies on negotiation state that in over 75% of the negotiations, both parties wait to see what the other party will do before they decide what to do themselves. And I thought this is a very interesting statistic because I tried to do some research on the topic before I wrote today's program, and I was shocked to see that 75%, so 3 out of every 4 people that you're going to negotiate with, they want to see what you're going to do before they decide what they're going to do themselves. So what that means is the person who has any kind of framework in mind gains an enormous advantage in the negotiating process. So if you go into any kind of negotiating situation and you've really thought it out and you've got the framework, if they say this, we'll do this. If I do this, they'll do this, and you really think this out, you've got a tremendous advantage in the negotiating process because the other person is waiting to see what you're going to do. With the framework, what you can do is you can actually set the agenda for the call. You're going to establish the tone of the negotiation and direct how the negotiation proceeds. And of course, when you look at that, that does give you enormous advantage over the other person. You've got to establish yourself as a negotiator to both your clients and your candidates. And you've got to do this very early in the process because keep in mind that their only interest is what's important to them. They don't really care about you. They don't care about your experience. They don't care about anything, but if they know that you're going to negotiate on their behalf, and you're an expert negotiator and you show them why it's going to benefit them to have you involved in the negotiating process, then more than likely they're going to agree to it because now they see the advantage of you negotiating for them. Both excitement and uncertainty are contagious. So your attitude can really make or break your ability to negotiate effectively. If you go into something and you're not sure and you're just hoping to God that something doesn't happen, it's kind of you're negotiating and praying rather than going in there and having a framework in mind. People can sense that you're uncertain. And remember, 75% of people that go into a negotiating conversation want to see what you're going to do first. So if they see you're pretty confident, you're excited about, your solution, you come in with a, very good solution to whatever you're negotiating, they're going to react to that. But if you come in and you're uncertain and you're kind of, all over the place or you're coming across nervous, they're going to take full advantage of that and basically negotiate very strong for what they want. Now let's talk about when. When do you actually negotiate? Because during the placement process, you negotiate numerous times, and you negotiate with both sides of the sale. Again, we have people on both sides of the sale, so you're going to negotiate with your clients, and you're going to negotiate with your candidates. And so I'm going to split this up and talk, first of all, when you're dealing with candidates. When do you need to negotiate? Well, obviously, some of the things you're not even thinking about because you just do them naturally. You're negotiating to obtain their resume. When you have a hit on the phone and they said, yes, I'm interested in you representing me, you've got to have them send you a resume. You have to negotiate when you show them the benefit in filling out your profile form or your application form, or if you're using a skills inventory sheet. They have to see the benefit to them if they're going to fill that out. You have to negotiate so they see the value in taking time off to go on interviews. You know, when you're first talking to somebody, that's when you're really setting up, are they going to go on interviews or not? And I know this is very frustrating. I just got back from the Fordyce Forum, and one of the recruiters there had brought up the fact that it's so frustrating trying to get people to take off time from work to go on interviews. They're like, well, I'm a hot commodity. They should interview me before or after work. Why do I have to take time off work? So, as you're interviewing them, you're showing them the value in taking time off to go on interviews. You have to negotiate a time when you can interview or profile them. Just having a resume tells you, and often resumes are fiction, but that tells you who they've been and who they are. It doesn't tell you who they want to be, which of course you have to find that out during your interview. You're obviously going to negotiate when you extend an offer. And much of the negotiating, when it comes to an offer, what are they going to accept or not, that is how, you're handling this throughout the whole entire placement process. And any of you that follow my training, I always believe in closing somebody to the no on money. And that process of closing to the no on money makes sure that offers are going to be extended. But another thing you have to do here is, people have access to other jobs. They've got networks. They can go online. And so when you're negotiating and before you extend an offer, you always, in every conversation with a candidate, when you're working with them and you're sending them out on a job, you always want to ask them if anything has changed. And you need to ask them if anything has changed throughout the whole entire placement process. Because if something has changed, now you've got to negotiate with them and see where they are. Because maybe what's changed is they just got a raise at their current company. Or maybe they've gone on an interview where you recruited them. They weren't actively interviewing, but now they are. You don't want to find out what's changed after you extend an offer. That's why every time you're prepping them, debriefing them, you're presenting an existing opportunity to them, every time you're interacting with candidates from the very first conversation, after that, every conversation, you want to say, has anything changed? Because people do change. And think about things that have happened to you where they always say life happens when you're busy planning something else. And it's the same in a job search. They may have told you everything in that first interview, but now a lot has changed since you've talked to them. You don't know it, so you're going on the premise that everything they told you in that first interview is true. And remember, when you interview somebody for the first time, their answers are guarded. You're a stranger they don't trust. It's the same thing. If you don't have developed trust and rapport throughout the process, when you go to extend an offer or really talk to them about what's most important to them, they're still giving you guarded answers because you haven't established the rapport and trust. When you ask them, has anything else changed? I want to take my direction from you. They realize you truly are interested in them. And obviously, you're going to negotiate with your candidate on the negatives of accepting a counteroffer. And the greatest way to do that is to just ask them, have you ever accepted a counteroffer in the past, or have you ever, had a coworker that accepted a counteroffer? How did it work out? Because most people that accepted a counteroffer aren't there 6 months later. It just doesn't work out. They got enhanced and they got attracted by the money and the advancement, and they forgot all the real reasons why they were looking to change a job. And so when you're negotiating with them on the negatives of accepting a counteroffer, always ask them, have you ever done this in the past? How did that work out? Do you know anybody who has accepted a counteroffer? Because more than likely it did not work out. The statistics on people that accept counteroffers and how few work out is definitely in our favor, and that's why this is something you want to bring up when you're negotiating with your candidates. Now let's talk about the client side. When do you negotiate? First of all, you negotiate for them to use you. And sometimes they'll tell you you have to have an approved vendor list. And often there isn't even an approved vendor list, but they've learned that gets most recruiters off the phone. So you've got to negotiate to basically be somebody they're going to utilize. You've got to negotiate your full fee or your margins if you're doing temp or contract. And you've got to negotiate with them the importance of sending you a detailed job description. And obviously when you're negotiating for them to be an approved vendor, you're also negotiating for them to sign your fee agreement so that, money is discussed up front. You're negotiating with them to utilize you versus your competition. You're negotiating when you want to get interviewing times up front and a target date to fill. If you ask them to sign off on the job description, that's obviously another way to negotiate, so everybody signs off on your job description. And obviously, all details of the offer. Too often, employers think that if they give us a start date and a salary, that's all we need. And especially in direct placement, there is so much more to an offer than money and start date. And it was interesting because we were talking to, we were networking a lot at the Fordyce Forum this last weekend, and I had so many people talk about offers that are going south. And in almost all the cases, they had not compared the benefit packages. And the benefit package that the candidate currently had was so much better than the new employer that even though money was much better, the benefits really ruined the deal. So you've got to know exactly what's involved. And when you get an offer, you have to know every little detail that's going to impact this candidate's ability to accept the job. And that's why the client has to give you all the details of their benefit package so that when an offer is extended, and when do the benefits take effect? If they don't take effect for 3 months or 6 months, which a lot of companies have gone to that, obviously that can ruin a deal. Now, why is it important to effectively negotiate? I think, you might be asking yourself that question. When you effectively negotiate, you're going to improve profitability. If you're an owner or manager on this line, you're in business to make a profit. And that's why the team that works for you has to be so proficient at negotiating, because if you're not making a profit, you're not in business. You achieve the desired outcomes while fostering relationships. People always say, does it have to be a win-win? I hear people say that all the time, negotiating has to be a win-win. Not really. There are some times where you might lose in the short term to win in the long term, but you're trying to impact the desired outcomes that you want. But it can't always be a win-win, especially in long-term relationships. You want to maximize financial returns and value, and this is when you're negotiating your bill rate, your pay rates, your fees, your contracts, your fee agreements. You want to avoid getting paid less than the value of your services. And a way to do that, I have always equated what I do to what they do. I remember when I placed in hospitality for a number of years, I would say, by the way, I would love to rent your penthouse on New Year's Eve weekend. A top of the line, liquor. I want the best, appetizers, and I'll go on and on. And by the way, I'd like to pay $500 total. And they're going to go, well, that's ridiculous. That's our highest weekend of the, we can give you something that's worth, 10 times that much for the price you just offered us. And I go, but that's what you're asking me to do. If you can equate it to what they're doing, often they can see the value. And when it comes to negotiating your fees and your bill rates and pay rates, this is where many of your recruiters are just extremely uncomfortable, and this is when they have to be at their best. They can't give a better rate to a total stranger than they give to your best clients. And people understand that. I can't possibly give you a better rate than my current clients are currently enjoying. We're in business to make a profit. I'm sure you understand that. And if they're not going to come up on their pay rates or bill rates, and you see the margins are too low or the fee is too low, you just have to walk away. It's okay for you to turn down business that is not worth your time. And I can tell you, those same clients that reduce your fees and reduce your margins, those are the clients that become collection problems. Those are those high maintenance clients. And so again, if you effectively negotiate, you're not going to get paid less than the value of your services. You also are going to neutralize difficult negotiators and their tactics, because, again, some people are just impossible to deal with, and those are the ones we either have to walk away from, or we have to look at the lifetime value of their business. You're going to enter into and conduct negotiations with confidence because you're going to have a roadmap. Remember, 75% of the people that go into a negotiating conversation haven't done any preparation. They're just waiting to see what you do. You have to know when and how to walk away. I think that, sometimes we accept business, and then when we hang up, we're like, I'm not going to work that. Like, they're not paying enough, or, we can't possibly work that. Look at the reduced fees. Then why did you waste their time and your time taking the order or writing the contract or writing the temp assignment? When you see things are just, the markup is just not something you can live with, you're not going to make any profit. And see, those of you that are recruiters on the phone, what you have to understand is your owners have to make a profit. If you quote low pay rates and high bill rates, again, sometimes I've seen actual contracts, net zero in profits. In other words, by the time your owner pays, the temporary or the contractor and pays the burden, they're not making any money. And that's if nothing happens. And you and I both know, especially on long-term contracts, that stuff happens. And so you've got to protect that everything you do makes your owner a profit, or they won't be able to employ you. You won't have a job because they won't have a company. So you have to know when and how to walk away. And I would talk with your owner or manager. What is the minimum markup they want to see, and what is the real markup where you're making a profit? Because your job is to be profitable. Your desk is a profit or a loss center. And obviously, as an owner, I want your desk to be a profit center. That's why you have to know when and how to walk away. And what good negotiating does is it really improves relationships with clients, because I find clients and candidates are much better when you just are straight with them and you're explaining why something won't work or why something will work. You don't want to take their time and just hang up and go, I'm not going to work on that. That's ridiculous. You need to educate them. And remember, education-based selling is what's working in the current marketplace. And if you position yourself as a knowledgeable professional, people are going to listen to what you're saying. And if you walk away, they're going to wonder why, and they're going to think they're going to be able to go out there and get your services at a much cheaper rate. And what almost always happens, they end up coming back to you because they can't find the caliber of person that you represent. Now, how do you master the art of effective negotiating? I find with most recruiters that sometimes we don't even want to call our job sales. And the word negotiating just seems to really intimidate, a lot of people. Well, in order for any type of negotiating to be successful, both parties involved must feel the process was fair and enjoyable. If you start quoting, it's our procedures, it's our policy, people stop listening and they just think you're going to screw them over. The minute they hear the word policy, they don't think that that's in their best interest. And remember, whoever you're negotiating with, whether it's a client or a candidate, they don't care about you. They don't care about your owner making a profit. All they care about is themselves. So in order to achieve this, you need to do the following. Number one, you've got to set yourself up as an effective negotiator to your clients and candidates very early in the process and show them why it benefits them to have you negotiate. Negotiating is one of my strongest areas. I'm not going to leave any money on the table if I'm representing a candidate. I'm going to tell you up front, where we've got people close to the client, so they know you're not going to play games. Secondly, you want to learn to ask questions that are geared to influence the outcome. I think in negotiating, it's the person that asks the best questions that wins. And just like interviewing, you don't want to ask close-ended questions. You don't want to ask a question where they can say yes or no. You want to ask questions that reveal to you where they're at, because remember, they're trying to determine what you're going to do before they're even deciding what they're going to do. So at the very beginning, if you ask some really good questions, that you're trying to find out exactly where they are on things, that will influence the outcome. The earlier that you set yourself up as an expert and the earlier you ask questions in the negotiating process, the better. And have a framework outlined prior negotiation. Remember, most people don't do that. So have a little outline that you're following when you get into a negotiating process. Manipulate the results you want while the parties involved are convinced they're making the choice that's best for them. And make sure you're gearing them toward a decision that is in their best interest. A lot of people say, well, I don't manipulate people. I don't manipulate the situation. If you're in sales, of course you do. But what you do is you constructively manipulate. Many people have a hard time making a decision. They have a hard time making a change. The human race is not that comfortable with negotiating. And sometimes it takes you trying to manipulate this, showing them what's in it for them if they make the right opportunity. And remember, the only thing the other person cares about is what's in it for me. Is this in my best interest? They truly don't care about you. And I have some recruiters say, I've got a very good rapport with my clients and my candidates. The bottom line is they would kick you to the curb if they didn't think that you were negotiating properly for them, or if they think they could get the same services someplace else cheaper. You also want to fine-tune your listening skills. You can't afford to have selective hearing. And so you've got to watch for red flags. And if they say something that's a red flag, you want to address it head on. Absolutely head on. This is something that you don't want to sit there and just pretend you didn't hear it. And again, I think sometimes we have selective hearing because we don't want the deal to go south. But you know what? If you're not listening to people, if you're not listening to them, then absolutely positively, you're going to have red flags come up and they're going to realize you're not hearing them because you're not addressing what's most important to them, and you're not going to end up, being positive in the negotiating process. So you've really got to fine-tune your listening skills. You can't be doing all the talking. You ask the questions and you listen, and you don't interrupt. and then you ask another question and you listen. And it's the way you're asking questions that's trying to lead the person, where you're trying to have them go. But again, remember, they've got to think that it's their decision. Keep in mind, it's not your job to agree or disagree with your clients or candidates. And this is really hard for all of us because I know, especially when you're really involved with a client or candidate, you can't help but have an opinion, and sometimes they do really stupid things. Both our clients and candidates do. And we get very frustrated. But again, it's not our job to agree or disagree with anything they say or do. Our job is to determine how you're going to satisfy the needs of the employer to ensure repeat business, and also, how are you going to find the opportunity for the candidate that basically hits the hot buttons of that candidate to ensure referrals, and basically enhance their desire to retain you as their lifetime recruiter. It's interesting. Every conference I go to, I went to an employment conference in San Diego a couple weeks ago where I was the only one for our profession. It was all corporate executives and talent acquisition, VPs and that, and they were like very flustered that I was in the room. And it was interesting, when I'm hearing them talk, it was very obvious that they don't care about us. All they care about is us making them look good. If we can make them look good and make their job easier, then they'll negotiate with us, and then they'll try to agree with some of the things we're doing. But unless we're hitting their hot buttons, if they don't think we understand for 2 seconds what is most important to them, your deal is going to go south because you haven't listened. And understand something, things change throughout the process. What they tell you in that initial interview is very basic information. It's when you've talked to them 2 or 3 times and re-ask them questions that you really find out what's most important to them, and now you know how to negotiate with them. Keep in mind that when you're negotiating, strong ethics on your part will ensure a long, successful recruiting career. You might say, I can convince anybody to do anything. Well, maybe you can. Maybe you've got a very strong personality, and maybe you've been successful at strong arm closing some of your candidates, but how satisfied are they really when they take the job? And were they really thrilled with working with you if you were, basically forcing too many issues upon them? When they accept a job, it's an emotional decision. It's not based on many facts. When it comes right down to it, when they accept or reject a job, it's an emotional decision. How did the interviewer make them feel? When they went into the company, how did they interact with the people that are there? Sometimes we get very frustrated because on paper it looks like it's a perfect match. But when we're dealing with our clients and our candidates, it's very emotional on their part because this job is either going to make or break them, and when somebody hires from us, it's going to make them look good or it's going to make them look bad. And so that's why you've got to be extremely ethical. You can't force close things. Or if something is surfaced at the last minute, if you want to solidify a relationship with either a client or a candidate, if something surfaces, let them know so they don't accept the job or they don't hire somebody. And now they've got a level of respect for you that no one else can match. It's not always about, the number of placements you make. It's the number of good placements you make, the placements that stick where people are happy. If you follow the advice in this webinar, you're going to master the skill of negotiating, and you're going to be more comfortable during negotiating. And when I was studying the negotiating, this topic for this particular program, I think the one thing that surprised me the most is that 75% of the people that try to negotiate with us have no plan. They haven't thought about anything up front. They get on the phone and they just start going. And, in that particular instance, you can really impact, what happens. You can really impact who they are. And now you know what's important to them, and that's when you have a great impact on the results. And obviously the results we want is a job that's accepted by one of our qualified candidates, and the person starts and stays. I talked to a recruiter recently that is having no problem closing deals, but her particular fall-off ratio is so high, and it was something like 3 out of every 5 people she places fall off before a guarantee period. Something is really wrong there. Something is really wrong, and she's just not asking enough questions. She really doesn't know much about these candidates, or they wouldn't all be leaving their jobs. So I guarantee you, if you follow some of the advice we've covered today, and the biggest thing is every time you go into negotiating, whether it's with a client or a candidate, just have a framework. Know what you're going to say, know what your ultimate goal is, knowing all their hot buttons so you're a successful negotiator. All right, I'm going to open the lines now for questions. You can ask me questions one of 2 ways. You can either go up on top, find your name and hit that hand. And if you hit the hand, I can unmute your lines and you and I could talk one-on-one, or you can go down below to where the questions are. Alyssa, I see that you have a question, but there was no question typed in. It's just your name. So I don't know what happened. And so if you could, if you could retype your question, Alyssa, all it has is your name. There's no questions. Okay, this is Lisa. Hi, Barb. Curious, what was the top takeaway you had from the Fordyce Forum? The top takeaway, let me think about that a minute, Lisa. That was a great question. What is the top takeaway I had? There were a number of things. That's why it's not that there weren't a bunch. I'm just trying to think of one thing that I would say to all of you that had my biggest takeaway. I think my biggest takeaway, of course, I'm a business owner, and so from my point of view, just all the statistics are in our favor. Like the best time for the recruiting profession is yet to come. And there is going to be such a shortage of talent and such a need for our services, that it is just going to be incredible. And I think, I think that one of the things that kept coming up, and you heard me mention in this section, was that things are changing very fast. The impact of technology on our profession has been phenomenal. And I think for those of you that don't have a mobile site for your website, that was another takeaway. Like, we've got a, mobile site for our site, but I know a lot of people don't. And the number of people that are finding us on phones now is just incredible versus laptops or hard drives, and so if you don't have a mobile app, that's something you really have to look into, because at this conference, as well as other conferences I've been addressing, most people are finding us now on their phones. They're not finding us searching on a computer anymore. So I think that was a good takeaway. And lastly, has anything changed? Because, with job boards and access that people have right now and their networks, things are changing. Where before they were working, they're busy doing their job, and then they let us conduct their search, and they're not necessarily looking on their own because there weren't job boards and there weren't all these other things. Well, now they are. And so that just the importance, Lisa, of asking, are there any changes? Have there been any changes since you and I talked? Then you're not going to have any surprises when you go to present, a job offer eventually to this person. They're not going to come back and say, well, gee, I've totally changed my mind. Let's see. Barb, I saw a webinar that you did on candidates we don't place. Can I get a copy? Yes, I did a webinar on, all you have to do is send an email to support@staffingandrecruiting.com, and we have a career portal. So any of you that don't know what to do with the candidates you're not placing, that's eating up 60 to 90 minutes of your day. And during the month of June, we actually have special pricing for the career portal. So if any of you are interested in the Happy Candidates career portal, if you want a link that walks you through, and this site actually generates passive income for you. But it's a place where you can say, wouldn't it be nice to know that you're helping 100% of the people that are attracted to your firm? So if some of you don't have that, we actually have a phenomenal bonus going on for the month of June. It'd be a great time to send an email to support@staffingandrecruiting.com and just put down career portal in the subject line, and we'll send you the information. Barb, I heard what you said, but the minute people start trying to reduce the fee, I crumble and agree to whatever they offer. My owner said I'm not quoting high enough for her to make profits, which obviously could jeopardize my job. How do I become comfortable? If you're not comfortable at negotiating, I don't know that anybody is comfortable at negotiating at the very beginning. It's a skill set you have to learn. And the way you learn how to negotiate effectively, just like overcoming objectives effectively, or, being good in your sales process, it just takes practice. And so, I would think, for somebody that is not comfortable in negotiating, it's more important for you than anybody else to write down the framework of what you're trying to get done. And you've got to ask your owner, what is the minimum markup we can go? Maybe the minimum markup is 45% over what you're going to pay your contractor or temporary. Maybe it's 75%. I mean, different niches have different, minimum standards. So what is the minimum amount that you can quote where you're basically respecting that your owner has to make a profit? And you've got to know what that markup is. And if I've got any owners and managers on the phone, your people have to know. What is the lowest fee you will work for? What about the guarantee? What about the markups? I mean, because this type of training is actually critical because, a lot of negotiating is around costs, salary, fees, guarantees, that type of thing. And most of your employees don't understand burden. They don't understand GMP. And so do you need to tell your people what the minimum markup is that they can go with? The answer is absolutely yes. And if somebody tries to give you business under what you know are minimum standards, and obviously you don't want to quote the minimum, because, many of you are bonus. If you're in contract and temp, many of you have a base, but you're bonused on, profits sometimes are incentivized. And so, the more money you can make for the owner, the better it is for you so that they can, have a good business. And so, you've got to know those minimum markups. And I think owner managers, make sure you share these. If you don't have it and your owner and manager is not on this call, ask them, what is the markup we have to see in order for me to accept business? And you just have to turn bad business and low margin business away. No business is better than working low margin business that's going to end up costing you money. Especially in the temp and contract segment of our profession, it's not about sales. It's about gross margin of profit. What hits the bottom line of the owner, eventually. So when you look at just the sales numbers can be very, very misleading. So in temp and contract, it's not about sales. It's about profits. Let's see. Okay, getting a bunch of thank yous. I see no more questions down here. Let me go up on top and see if anybody raised their hand. I see no hands being raised, but I see more question marks. So let me go down below again. When you talk about establishing a framework for negotiating, are you talking about thinking through what you want to accomplish? Is there more of a formula to it? No, there isn't. I would like to say there's a formula, and I can give you that formula, and this is how you go into negotiating, because we're negotiating all kinds of things. When it comes to the client side, you're negotiating to try to get interviewing times with them. You're negotiating, obviously offers, but you're negotiating fees and, contracts and guarantees and that. And so that's why it's so important, when you're in a negotiating process, that you know what you're trying to negotiate. And I always tell people that are doing direct hire, quit working with 5%. People that are at 25%, the minute somebody asks them to negotiate the fee, they go down to 20%, thinking they're reducing the fee by 5%, when in essence, 25% represents 100%. So you've now knocked down, everything by 20%. That's a huge, huge deduction. And so you just have to look at every situation, and you've got to do pros and cons, about exactly what you're trying to accomplish, when you go into a negotiating process. Let's see, a bit off the topic, but I've been wondering if setting up a business, this is from Linda, page on Facebook would be beneficial in our business. Thank you. Yes, in every conference I've been at, Linda, you need to have a business Facebook page and then have your personal Facebook page separate. And so is it advisable to have a business Facebook page? Now, I will tell you, Linda, if you don't have time to do it, you never intend to participate much on it, then don't do it. And Google Plus is really, getting very popular now in business. I would think the most important place for a business to be, if I had to rate one place and you've only got time to really do one thing, I would have a very heavy presence on LinkedIn. Because obviously LinkedIn is the site that's used by, most employers, most clients. They go to see your LinkedIn profile. And if you're on Google Plus or Twitter or, Facebook, those are kind of all secondary to LinkedIn. And the next one, I'd probably go to LinkedIn, Google Plus, and then I'd probably go to Facebook third. Let's see here. Okay, this is a very long question, so I'm trying to read the whole question first. Okay, this is a very long question, but in essence, it's what if you have a client you've worked with for a long time and all of a sudden now they're asking for a flat 15% and they won't negotiate. They've just made the decision that, everybody's going to be paid 15% regardless. They don't care about how many people you've placed. They don't care about how long you've worked with them. Then you've got to make a decision because that's a significant drop. If you're used to working at 25% and they're asking you to work at 15%, that is a significant drop. And so maybe now you have to walk away from the business and this person becomes a source. Because, you can't work at rates that are not competitive. You know, if you decide to work at this, then what services are you not going to offer? Are you going to not check references? Are you going to not do certain things? You have to go out there and market and find good business. Let's see here. I've got another long... Let's see here. Okay, I've got another long question. Let's see here. My company specializes in admin office positions for permanent, temp to perm, and temporary. We test our candidates online for Microsoft skill level for the first time in years. A candidate does not want to take these tests. I've not met her face-to-face, but have done an initial phone interview and profile form. She feels they're a waste of time and don't lead to jobs. How would you handle her? She emailed me and said her references and experiences speak for themselves. I would tell her that the only reason that you've started doing this, Barb, is that your clients have requested it, and they don't want to test on premise anymore. They used to test skill sets as part of their interviewing process, and so now they're asking you to do, and you have to send the results to them as part of your process, and that you've got many clients doing this. And so if she doesn't take the test, it's going to avoid you from sending her to some of your best clients, because it's your best clients that are asking for this. And say what they're trying to do is get you to take the tests online, because they used to bring you back to their office, and you'd have to, you know, so you'd have to take off work and go to their office more than once, especially if you're interviewing on a lunch hour, because they were testing you there. And we've found, quite frankly, that people score much higher when you take the test online. You're not stressed out by time frame. You're not at somebody else's location. You're typing on a computer that you're comfortable with. And so we saw a great advantage to this, because now, number one, we're not going to waste your time. If you can't pass certain tests, they're not going to hire you. So now we know where we can send you and where we can't send you. You're not going to be at the interview a long, extended period of time and go through the nerve-wracking, you know, process of being put in a big testing room. You could test online. So I would talk about all the wonderful reasons why this is in their best advantage, and how nice it is that they're letting you do this rather than keeping that up their company for 2 hours, and that you find, you know, that people are scoring much, you know, much higher when they take the tests online. And so the fact that so now you're showing her all the benefits of doing that. Let's see, great suggestion saying. So you're welcome, Barb. It's always, you know, about them, and I think sometimes they're afraid of taking the test because their skill sets have not been that great. Maybe they're doing more admin work than typing, you know, and so now they're worried, or maybe they're self-taught. Because if you're self-taught and you take an Excel exam, I would love to see what I would get an Excel test online. I'm sure I would flunk it, because I have the Barbara Bruno way of using Excel, which is not at all, I'm sure, the most efficient way. So probably, can I work in Excel? I can. Can I create the cells? Of course I can, but am I doing it right? And I think maybe she was self-taught. You know, you might also want to discuss, you know, why the tests make her nervous in that, but that you're noticing that the skill sets and the results are much higher when they're tested online. And that's why you were thrilled when they're allowing you to do this now. And I don't want to waste your time. And you can do this whenever it's good for you, in the evening after work, whenever it's convenient, you're relaxed on your own computer. Now they see the benefit. Okay, I see no additional questions, and we've got 20 more minutes. You can ask me questions one of two ways. You can either go to the top, and if you put a PIN number in, click that yellow hand, and you and I can talk openly, or you can go to the bottom and type your questions. All you have to do is click that plus sign next to the word questions. Okay, here's another one. I think we're afraid to ask questions because you might start role-playing, negotiating with us, and I certainly don't want to role-play until I improve my negotiating skills. Well, I hope that's not the reason, but I guess that could be the reason. I don't see any questions, so we're going to end this call early. What I suggest all of you do, remember, when you come on these calls, you know, you write down everything that goes on between these calls. Okay, I've got some more questions. And the reason you want to write down questions, because it doesn't only have to be on the topic of the week. It can be on anything. Okay, how do you determine a good account from a bad account? We're doing some heavy business development, and it is a challenge to fire accounts. The good accounts are the ones that make you money. They pay you on time. They've got high margin, high profits. You don't have to love them. They have to love you. But they have to pay you on time. See, a client is not somebody that gives you orders. A client is somebody that impacts your revenue. And so a client is somebody who gives you orders. They hire from you, and they impact, you know, the profits of your company. So when you're looking at, you know, who are good clients, who are bad clients, who are key accounts are people that give you multiple openings. You know, they call you as one of the first people they call. They're communicating with you. They're giving you interviewing times. You know, you're not going to fire businesses when you're new. And by the way, I don't tell a client I'm firing them. I don't believe in doing that. You know, and the reason I don't do that is you never know when that person's going to end up, you know, where they're going to end up. And so, you know, I just say that, you know, we're not going to be able to work, you know, on these orders, and let me explain why. And I let them know if it's salary level, if it's a fee percentage, or whatever it is, I'll let them know why we have to walk away. In a very informative way, I'm trying to educate them on why we've had to walk away, not say I'm firing you. We have a person trying to do split agreements and bringing in business at 10 to 15%. Is it just me? Let's see. Number one, if somebody's working a split fee agreement and then bringing in business at 10%, so you're splitting 10 or 15%, I would walk away from that business. That's way low when you think of the current markups in that. I would not work split business at 10 or 15%. Is it just me, or are other recruiters having a hard time getting a hold of people on cold calls? It seems like very few people answer their phones at work. You're right, they do, and so it depends on your voicemail, John, that you leave. And the most effective voicemail to leave is, somebody suggested we talk, John. You know, my name is Barb Bruno. When you call me back, please interrupt me no matter what I'm doing so I don't miss your call. I really look forward to our conversation. Again, it's Barb Bruno. They never ask you who gave you their name. They just don't. But the fact that you told them they can interrupt you, they almost always call back. People aren't answering phones. You know, they're doing voicemail. And so I think that, you've got to leave strong voicemails. And when you make another person feel good about themselves, they will call you back. Let's see. I'm having a hard time explaining this to a teammate. Okay, so you've got a teammate that's splitting and bringing in very low margin business. Then get your teammate on these calls and let me interact with them and ask me the question when they're on the phone, and I'll be glad to share my answer with them. Because, you know, if you're splitting 10% business, which means you're earning 5%, you know, where normally you earn 25%, you'd have to make 5 of those deals to generate the same revenue. Why would you do that? You know, especially in today's job market, there's no reason to do that. So my theory is get your teammate on the phone and let them listen to me, and I'll give them the same exact response. What would you look for when hiring a salesperson? When I'm hiring a salesperson, I want to look for a history of sales, or I want a history of peak performance. If I'm going to hire a recent grad, I want someone who got good grades but participated in sports and was very active and just has a track record of success. When you go to hire salespeople, you've got to look at their past. It's a window into the future. So when I'm looking for salespeople, I prefer people that have sold something and were great at it and just are that overachiever type. If they were in sports, they played. If they were a student, they got great grades. If they worked, they were the best. And so that's who you hire. Barb, would you walk away from 12 to 15%? I would. Now, Willie, I don't know what your situation is. I don't know if, you know, you're having a hard time. You just don't have any order flow right now. You know, if it's a matter of keeping your doors open and you're an owner, you know, maybe you have to accept that business. I could see in 2009 and 2011, a lot of things were done. Is there a reason to work under 20% right now on direct placement? The answer is no. You need to get out there and make some great marketing calls and show people why you're worth every dime they pay you. 12 to 15% is not a competitive rate right now. The only, you know, maybe if they're giving you volume hires, but volume orders, you know, again, I would never reduce a fee for volume orders. You know, I believe in charging a full fee but discounting every third placement people make with us, you know, because that gives them an incentive to, you know, save money on every third placement. But 12 to 15% are not competitive rates right now, not at all. And what you might want to think of doing is climbing the ladder, placing the supervisors who you're currently placing, because the higher levels you go up, the less inclined they are to negotiate your fee. So why don't you think about, you know, marketing your services to jobs that are supervising the positions you're currently placing. Okay, let me go on top, see if there's any more questions. I don't see any hand. Oh, here's a hand. Willie, I just unmuted you. Did you have another question, Willie?
Barb, no. You always give great advice, and you helped me learn how to basically negotiate that fee.
Good. And if you need any other help, Willie, I mean, just reach out to us, you know, and all of you. I mean, you've got our support email, the support@staffingandrecruiting.com, and I do 6 live calls a month, you know, so I want to be on here, and I love people like Willie that bring specific problems because, you know, I want you to leave these calls and have something you go back to your desk and make more money on. So thanks, Willie. I'm going to mute your line, and let's see if there's any other Would you work with competitors? I don't know what that question means. If that question is, would I split deals with competitors? I might, if in fact, we have an agreement up front. Other agencies, we do some split business, but very little. And the reason is we're so specialized and we only do the Chicago market. And so sometimes when I'll reach out to another firm is if one of my clients in Chicago has an opening in another state and I don't want to go off on a tangent. So I'll find somebody who places in our niche in another state and then split a deal with them rather than going off and surfacing candidates I'm never going to utilize. So yes, I think, but you've got to be careful. If I'm splitting with somebody, I always look for people that have a track record of success. I hope that they belong to one of the associations. That means they adhere to a code of ethics. And if I'm going to split with another agency, I want everything in writing. I want every single thing in writing. How are we going to split? When do people get paid? How does this work? And so I want everything in writing. It's not just a verbal agreement because that could be, somebody could walk away with your client or your candidates. You want to make sure you have things in writing up front and it's somebody you trust. I also look for people that are certified. Do they have their CPS, their CTC? They earned a certification, and there's many different certifications you can earn right now. And obviously, I've got my certifications through NAPS. I have the CPC and CTS, and I was very involved in that certification program, so that's the one I know best. But there are other certifications. I don't care where you get your certification, just become certified, and that gives you a competitive edge. Let's see. All right, I see no hands up on top. Let me see if I see any more questions down below. I see none, so we're going to end a little bit early. Let's see, wait. Hold on a second. The problem is you cannot work with those competitor clients when you do splits. No, you're absolutely right. If you do a split with somebody and they have a client, then that's part of the deal. If they have the order and you have the person, then you can't go and try to steal the client away from them if you're doing splits with them. That's absolutely right. So there is advantages and disadvantages when you do split business. All right, everybody, there's no more questions. You've got about 10 minutes. I hope you use these 10 minutes to do some of your non-prime time, activities if in fact you're in the Central Time Zone or Eastern Time Zone. I know those of you in Pacific, we're still in kind of your prime time hours. So you've got 10 more minutes now to do something that you didn't know you had time for. So I hope you use these ideas, and I most certainly hope that you negotiate more effectively so all of you make more money as a result of this call. Thanks so much for joining me.